Hello everybody, my name is Katie, and today's video is going to be my favorite middle grade. So middle grade is actually the classification or age range that I read the most. It's probably my favorite. So a lot of my favorite books I've mentioned before in past videos, but I either deleted them or they were on an old channel that I don't use anymore. So for this new channel, I will be doing basically just reiterating a lot of those mostly same books, but there are quite a few that are different now. So let's get into these. Okay, so the first two books are actually from the same series, and yes, I will have to say this is my favorite. One of these is my favorite, like, all-time book, probably. However, the only reason it is technically above this second one is because of nostalgia factor, and this is only for now. This may change. I may end up not liking my favorite book at the moment for the rest of my life, but at the moment, my absolute favorite book is Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones, and right underneath that is the third book in this trilogy, House of Many Ways. Diana Wynne Jones is probably my favorite author. I've read several of her books and I've enjoyed all of them. These two, though, are my favorite of hers. This one is Howl's Moving Castle. I'm probably sure that you know what this is about, but it's about a woman named Sophie Hatter who ends up cursed to be an old woman and has to work in Howl's Moving Castle as a housekeeper. It's romance, it's fantasy, it's very odd. A lot of the country is based off of England, that this one is in specifically. A friend of mine just read it. I'm actually rereading this one and this one this month because said friend is going to be reading this one. But it is a very fun book. It's a little bit darker than you would expect though, so it has a really odd twist and it's very, very fun. This one is about a young woman named Charmaine who actually goes to house sit her sorcerer grandfather or something like that. Maybe, oh, I think it's uncle, great uncle. Goes and house sits for her great uncle as he goes with the elves because he's been extremely sick. This book is so odd. The house itself is fantastic. It's absolutely fun. I will say this is the third book in the series, and while you do have to read Howl's Moving Castle to understand some of the things that go on in this, you do not have to read the second book to read this one. And personally, the second book, while it is still a lot of fun and it is still really good, the main character is not as interesting as Charmaine or Sophie. First up one I'm going to point out is Bob by Wendy Mass and Rebecca Steed. I'm actually currently reading this one. I've reread it, or this is me rereading it. And this is about a woman or a girl who goes back to Australia to stay on her grandmother's farm for the month, I think. And while she's there, she finds a goblin in her old bedroom from when she was 5, and he knows exactly who she is, and she does not remember him at all. And now you have to figure out what they did that first time she saw him, basically figure out the mystery of where he came from. It's a very sweet book. That's mostly what I have to say about this one. It is extremely sweet. The characters are cute. Bob himself is adorable and dumb. The girl is kind of going through that, like, I'm cool, I'm 10, I'm almost 11 kind of attitude, and it's very nice to see her go from being like that to kind of getting back into, not immature the way she was when she was 5, but finding kind of her way back to her old attitude, her old interests, her old, I don't want to say personality, but kind of. You know what I mean? And that's really what this book is about. But it's very, very sweet, very cute, and the illustrations are adorable. Oh, by the way, those illustrations are done by Nicholas Gannon. I need to remember that. I want to be a book illustrator. You kind of need to mention who illustrated the book. The next book in this list is kind of a surprise to no one, considering he is my second favorite author of all time, and it is The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. Yet another book I plan on rereading this month. So this is about a boy named Bod who has been living in a graveyard his whole life, being raised by ghosts, and he kind of has to find himself, what happened to his family, and learn to grow up. It is a super fun book. It's a little bit dark, as you would expect from a book that takes place in a graveyard. A couple of things that are odd about it is that it's one of those books that you can't really explain the plot to, even if the person doesn't mind spoilers, because of the way it's written and the order of events that happen. Some things seem extremely random while they're actually not, and vice versa and stuff like that. Which is just kind of how Neil Gaiman writes. Sometimes he writes something that seems like it has absolutely nothing to do with the rest of the story, and then it pops up again at the end. This one is really, really fun. It's not necessarily sweet, I wouldn't say, but the characters are well written. They're all really funny. If you want to listen to this on audio, I would actually recommend, same for The House of Many Ways and Howl's Moving Castle, because the narrator for those two is absolutely fabulous, and Neil Gaiman himself narrates most of his books. There are a few I think that he has not narrated, but this one he does, and he does a fabulous job. And if you are really in love with the atmospheres that he writes, I would suggest listening to him read it, because he really pushes that atmosphere with the way that he reads. This one I have here is actually a book that I've never heard anybody else talking about. Not that they don't, but I've just never seen it, and it is Where the Mountain Meets the Moon by Grace Lin. So this is, I'm pretty sure, Chinese inspired fantasy, historical, not really fantasy. And this is about a young girl who lives in a valley that is just dried out. There is no rain, no water. They're all very, very poor. And she goes on a journey to find the man on the moon, or the old man of the moon, to find answers and ask questions and ask him to bring water back to her land. And she goes on this adventure where she meets dragons, she meets like folk tale characters. It's a beautiful little story about understanding worth and family, and how stories are important, and it's super, super sweet and cute, and it's kind of big, it's kind of long. I will say, for the majority of reading it, it doesn't really feel like a lot is happening, but it's because of the way that the story intertwines with itself. While you're reading this, you're actually getting in another story about a tiger man or something like that. I don't really remember what they were calling him, but it's so interesting to read about the folk tales that are going on inside of this book. The next book I have here is actually another series, but I'm only going to be showing you the first one because it is my favorite of the series, and it is Inkheart by Cornelia Funk. So most people know what this book is about, but it's about a girl whose mother goes missing when she's a baby, and then a man named Dustfinger finds them, and soon they're on the run and some weird stuff starts happening. It's another one of those stories are important kind of books. It's a fantasy, it takes place in a book, it's very fun. The main character, what is her name? Maggie. She's not really the main character actually, but she is an important character. Maggie is really witty and funny. She's very smart. She's very tenacious. She's very brave. She's kind of dumb because she's like 12 or younger, but still I don't think that it really ruins anything in the book when she does something kind of dumb, because that's just how that aged kids are. Dustfinger is fantastic. I love him as a character. The series as a whole is like it's an adventure. I don't know how else to say. The magic in this is very interesting. It's not super well explained, but I don't think it's supposed to be. I think it's supposed to be kind of like it's fantastical. There's no reason why any of this should work, but it does. And the world inside of this is gorgeous. The characters, aside from just Maggie and Dustfinger, are super interesting. I would say the villain in this one is my favorite. He is so crazy and he makes a fabulous villain. I don't know how else to say that. This book, I will say a lot of people really didn't like when it first came out, and they still might not like it. And I will say the series as a whole is not fantastic, but the books individually until the last one are actually really, really good in my opinion. And it is The Iron Trial by Holly Black and Cassandra Clare. I will say a lot of people really hated this book when it came out. A lot of them were saying it's exactly like Harry Potter. It isn't. It's actually nothing like Harry Potter. I read the first 2 books of that series, and this, in my opinion, is better. This is about a boy who is a magician, or he's supposed to be, and he goes into the Iron Trial, which is what gets you into this magic school, and he tries his best to fail it and actually ends up succeeding. And it's about why he should never go and become a wizard or a sorcerer or whatever they're called. I think they're just called magicians. This is definitely a found family, and the characters are honestly fantastic. Some of my favorite characters from Middlegrade are in this book. The trio, which ends up becoming like 4 characters actually, are all super funny and super witty. And Cal, the main character, as even though he's got kind of like an inferiority complex, and for good reasons, he ends up being a wonderful protagonist. And the antagonist in this series is such an odd one. Again, by the end of it, I think that last book was just kind of unnecessary, unless they're going to continue the series into another series. But up until the 4th one, the villain is so much a lot, like, and a good a lot. And it also makes it interesting how the villain is actually, like, everybody believes is dead, and he is not really, and it's super cool the way that was done. These are books that I definitely want to reread. I haven't had the opportunity to recently. This isn't one of the books that I was planning on rereading this month, but honestly, it may end up being one of them, because now that I'm talking about it, I really want to reread the first 4 books. Next up, we have actually my favorite middle grade series so far, is Artemis Fowl by Owen Colfer. I love these books. They are so good. The first one is a little bit much if you don't like the whole, like, what would it be, like green, like going green and all these other things. This one is very heavy on that, like the push that humans are ruining the earth, but it's that way for a specific reason, and it is because the humans kicked all the fairies off of the earth and are polluting it, which they are, and it's taking the magic out of the soil and out of the earth, and the fairies are kind of stuck. So in this one, Artemis Fowl, who is 12, is looking for what is called a fairy Bible, and he intends on kidnapping a fairy and ransoming them for gold. And the other main character is named Holly. She is a lep recon, basically in the police force for the fairies. Her whole thing is that she is the only female and is the first female to work in lep recon. So it's kind of her proving herself, and Artemis being a smart aleck pretty much the entire time. One of my favorite characters, as in all of these, is in this one, and I don't have any characters in this book that I don't like in this series. There are characters in almost every book that I've pointed out that I don't like, except for this one. Like, ugh, I don't even know. It's so good. I've reread Artemis Fowl like 7 or 8 times. This book specifically, this first one, is about him kidnapping a fairy and getting ransom money, or trying to, and I think it's a really good kickoff for kind of the rest of the series and how the relationships end up working. And because there's more than one of these, you know that like the fairies and him continue to intermingle, I guess would be a good way to say that isn't like spoiling anything. And the villain in this is Artemis, which makes me so happy because I love those kinds of books. So if you like the villain is the main character, then you're gonna like Artemis Fowl. Okay guys, so those are all of my favorite books that I have to show you today. There are other books that I absolutely love and would love to show you, and other book series that I absolutely love and would love to show you, but I only pointed out ones that are book series if I loved more than one book in that series, and they were a favorite book. Anyway, guys, that's all I have for you today. I hope you I hope you enjoyed it. Have a wonderful evening, afternoon, or morning, depending on when you're watching this. Please like and subscribe, and comment, because I still want to know what y'all's favorite books are. Middle grade if you read them, since that's what this video is about. And I will see you all in my next one. Until then, happy reading. Bye.